Hi there guys and welcome to another EDH Geeks video, and in this video, in case you didn't know by clicking the title and seeing the image descriptor, talking about the 5 ways that people use instance wrong in Commander. So this happens a little bit. And everyone makes mistakes sometimes playing the game of Commander. It's a very complicated game, and sometimes as well when the game's going along, it can be, quite difficult to play, the best. And this is also why I think, or why there's a lot of sort of things going on, I think, as well. It's sort of like, well, what is going on? I can't keep track of or understand or what, and it's just sometimes one of those things where it is like this, that you do make mistakes and whatnot, and some people don't really explain what's going on, but you just like, you know, got to focus on what you need to do, and it is hard sometimes, as I say, but in using instance, we want to be very selective for the most part in using them, because we probably maybe, I know that nowadays we usually lose a little bit more in more casually competitive sort of Magic, but like, again, it's still a relatively small amount, maybe a little bit more than we used to. We used to probably run maybe 5 pieces of removal. Now it's more like 7 to 10, depending on the deck. Now, when you get into CEDH, it's more like half the deck is removal or whatever, and counter spells. I count as removal as well, but especially in those formats, because it's more about stopping things before they happen, more so, I guess. But anyway, the 5 ways that people misuse instance, and just slight suggestions, I guess, as to how to use them better, because it sort of relates to saying, well, this is the way that you do it wrong, so obviously the opposite, or what have you, is basically the better way of doing it. So, number 5 is using your instant speed spell as if it is a sorcery. Now, sometimes there are things that make your instant a sorcery, but this is the most powerful thing about an instant, is that it's an instant. It's not just a sorcery that you have to cast on your turn, and especially in Commander there are 4 other players for the most part, so you've got a lot of leeway in which to do things. You can allow your opponents to work for you sometimes, because sometimes you're, well, I don't want to use my removal on this thing. I will only use my removal if I absolutely have to, or if somebody else doesn't want to use theirs or what have you, or doesn't have the removal at the time. So, waiting to the last possible moment is the best thing to do that you can potentially do. Waiting till you absolutely have to kill the thing, or it's also the kind of like thinking about it as if you're countering a spell in a way. If you're actually going to blow this thing up or exile it or what have you, you want to wait till the very last minute to do it, as if they were about to cast a spell that says, I win because of this card. You're almost thinking like this card is almost suspended until the very last moment on their turn or what have you, and it's about to resolve or whatever. It is on the field, I'm not saying that, it's just you're trying to think of it as if it's almost not there until the very last minute. That's a good way of thinking about it, because if you think to yourself, oh, well, this is such a big problem, but you don't realize that the next player after you has actually just got a 2-card combo in their hand, and then you go, oh, well, now we're in real trouble, because this person might have been threatening to win, but now, because if I had have sat there and went, okay, well, cool, I see that that's a threat, I'm going to kill it on my turn, I don't have any more mana open, potentially, and probably. So by the time it's gotten to this next person's turn, they just combo up and win. If I save my removal until the last minute, again, I have saved my mana. And therefore, I can be like, well, now I can respond to this person who's actually going to win right here, right now, or is threatening to win right here, right now. And I can still potentially deal with this other thing as well, maybe, I don't know. But it does depend, and you do need to stop somebody from winning sometimes because you want to be winning. Alright. So, number 4, and I've sort of not really put these in very much of an order, from most important to least important or whatever, or what have you. It's very much off the cuff, as I sort of say most of these videos are. But again, you know, number 4 is that you don't have enough of what I would call variance of targeting removal. So your instant basically only hits creatures. Now this is okay and fine if it's very, very streamlined and efficient and good removal, like Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile and whatnot. Those are fine being narrow cards because they only deal with one threat. But just cards that only deal with perhaps artifacts or whatever, or enchantments only, or they only deal with you know, creatures, or they only deal with one permanent type or whatever, or one thing in a graveyard or whatever. These sorts of things that don't answer enough different things overall are just going to leave you with not enough things to be able to hit with your removal. Now, when you go to cast your removal, you want to be able to hit 99% of the things that are on the battlefield or, you know, being cast. That's why, again, the sort of counter spells are very good in certain circumstances, but in certain circumstances, again, they're bad because, you know, once somebody actually casts the spell that basically wins them the game, or almost wins them the game, and then you go to your turn somehow or whatever, and you actually draw your card, and then you're like, well, there's the counter spell on the top. That's great. It doesn't do me anything now. Or maybe it does because all they've got to do is basically untap. All they need is actually their mana to actually activate their thing. They didn't quite have enough mana to activate their thing. They've got both their threats on the field, but they didn't have the mana to activate them. So that's one way it can be bad. But again, just things that don't hit enough permanence or enough things on the field or within the play, because once again, in graveyard is within play, especially for certain decks. So just having a better swath of removal that can hit multiple different permanent types is much better. So you should run things that hit multiple different things and have a lot of versatility to them, but are also fairly sort of efficient. And that's the next thing as well that I'm going to sort of be talking about. So number 3 is mana efficiency. So in terms of instants, you really want your instants to be like 3 CMC at the very most. You do not ever want to be holding up any more than like 3 mana, unless you've got Cyclonic Rift, then that's a bit different, but that's completely different. For a targeted removal, you don't want to be holding up any more than 3 mana, because at 4 mana, you can have just a Wrath, and again, you can have Cyclonic Rift at 7 and whatnot, so you basically just get rid of everything at instant speed. So when you get to 3 mana, once again, your removal has got to be extremely good at that sort of cost. So it's got to do more than just one thing, what have you. It just can't kill a creature. Now, there is some removal that its CMC is for on the text box, but, whatever, in the casting cost, but its actual cost is not what it says on the card, because it says that you can play it for an alternate cost, like Fierce Guardianship. For the most part, I think that you count that as 0 mana, because even though it says 3 mana, it's literally 9 times out of 10, for the most part, I think, for most decks, 0 mana, because you're going to have your commander out most of the time to be able to cast it for free. So, just cards that are like that. But, just thinking about the CMC of your card, again, like saying Swords to Plowshares is very good. Yes, it is, because it's 1 mana. But it only, as it said, it only does one thing. Look at Beast Within and Generous Gift. They're very good for their CMC and for what they hit, is what I was saying before. You know, so that's the sort of stakes that you're at for the most part. Or you want something that does a little bit more than just it destroys an artifact or enchantment. That can be okay if it says something else, like more effective removal, which we'll be talking about in a second, and then it does something else. It doesn't just get rid of the threat if necessary, but it also has another mode, perhaps to be cycled away or whatever. You've really got to consider these other effects that are on the card, or perhaps a third mode, not just hitting 2 things, but hitting 3 things. So considering the CMC of your card and what it sort of does overall is very good. Not considering what your card does and just having a card that says like Putrefy, or like whatever the Orzhov one is. I can't think of what it's called right off the top of my head. But those both only hit 2 different permanent types. Basically, for the most part, you can kill a creature, or, well, Swords to Plowshares, like I said, for 1 mana. So you've already got that covered. You've already got artifact and enchantment destruction mostly at 2 mana, and there are some 3 mana ones, but again, I'll sort of talk about some of the 4 better ones again in a minute, to a degree. But again, like, you're not looking for these things that sort of say 4 mana do a thing. It's just not that good, even if there's a slight downside to some of these other cards, like Anguished Making and Assassin's Trophy. It is much better to have those sorts of cards for their CMC, even despite the downside. And same for Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile. They might have that slight downside, but it just doesn't matter that much. The upside of it is where you're looking for other things. And again, like, you're looking for things that basically can hit a lot of different permanent types, or have some other utility, like cycling away, or like my next thing, which is number 2, I believe, if I'm counting right, which is exile-based removal. So one of the biggest things in the game is recursion. Now, there is a very, very slight amount, if any, exile-based removal recursion. And it's just very unlikely that you're ever going to see exile-based recursion. It's hardly ever going to happen. So exile-based removal is the best sort of removal. And if you can find that sort of removal on a card, then that is a card to be considered slightly higher than just simply destroy. Because especially there are certain cards out there that are indestructible and that you do need to deal with, and having, again, another thing that the card does, it doesn't just destroy it, it exiles it. That bumps it up a little bit more than saying, oh, it just destroys something. Having it destroy something is still relevant in certain circumstances, like, again, I said, Generous Gift and Beast Within are very good for their cost, and you can still hit most things that you need to be able to hit with them. And again, like we're looking not anymore at anything that's more than 3, but again, there's Anguished Unmaking, Path to Exile, and Swords to Plowshares are the most well-known ones, but there is a white one and there is a green one that both exile artifacts and enchantments that are both CMC 3. Now, the green one isn't quite as good as what the white one is, but the white one is pretty good, and the white one is from Mammon-Ket, I believe, which basically its other mode on it has cycling, which is really good as well, because if you just draw it late and it's not relevant really anymore, or it's clogging up your hand and you just don't have the mana for it or something else, or there just really aren't that many good threats out there right now, or perhaps you've got Okeomancer or something else to get it back, I don't know. But again, it's just not the best card in your hand. You can cycle it away for 3. That's what I mean by having another mode as well, what I was sort of saying before. But the another mode, or the more mode on it, again, is sort of it having that exile-based removal. It's a little bit more up because it has exile-based removal, and it's a little bit more up again because it has that third mode essentially on it where it's able to be cycled away. Wilt, I believe that's the new one from Mycoria, I believe, which is CMC 2, and it has destroy artifact enchantment or cycle it away for 2 as well. That's quite a good card as well. There's Return to Nature, which as well destroys artifacts or enchantments, but also can exile a card from a graveyard. So that's also quite a good one. So just be on the lookout for those ones as well. So number 1, I believe we've got there finally, is that people choose the wrong targets for their removal. Now, as I sort of said earlier in the video, it's sometimes hard to make choices with what your removal is going to hit sometimes, but sometimes people are a bit too trigger happy with their removal, but also sometimes people just go, oh well, I don't know what to hit, I'll just hit your mana rock. That is literally the worst thing ever, I think, pretty much. Or I'll just hit your thing that's actually just drawing your cards or whatever. Literally, again, it's just the worst thing ever. It's just not helpful to really anyone. It's detrimental to the player. They might not be able to play the game anymore. And that's the difference, I think, again, between saying, I'm going to stop you from winning. You can play the game all you want. That's fine with me. And this is my philosophy again. People should be allowed to play the game. But if they're going to try to win, you should do everything that you can do to stop them. Now, of course, in a sense, stopping them from playing the game is stopping them from winning. But I think that that's just mean. I think that that's just a silly way to play the game. I think people should, once again, be allowed to play the damn game. This is a game. People should be allowed to play the game. So you shouldn't destroy people's artifacts, or enchantments that are drawing them cards, or artifacts that are making them mana and whatnot, unless it's a really good mana rock or whatever, and it's basically going to win them the game. Something that basically draws them cards and gives them mana and does something else or what have you, like the Great Henge does. It's just a ridiculously good card and you probably should get rid of it. But that aside, if it's stopping that player actually playing the game, like if it's this person's way ahead, then it's a bit different. But if it's just going to stop that player from progressing in the game or actually being effective in the game and they're basically now out of the game, then I just feel like it's not worth doing. I think if it stops somebody from winning at the time, then that's fine. But again, just choose the right pieces to get rid of when you're playing. It's sometimes harder to sort of say, but choose the thing that is actually the biggest threat for the most part, and don't be too trigger happy with your removal. And I sort of probably should have said that in here somewhere, is that some people again are just way too trigger happy with their removal, as I sort of said, but they will just like have a hand and be like, oh cool, I drew removal. You know what? Okay, what's on the board that I should get rid of? You know, what? Why? Why are you going to get rid of anything? What's the point? There's nothing on the board unless you would know if there was something on the board that you should have gotten rid of. Really. If you go, oh, he just played, you know, what's his name? The triple mana guy. I can't think of his name now. From Theros. Oh, man. Dang. Or is it from M21? Yeah, whatever. But if somebody has something that's just giving them a ton of mana, an exclamation, D-whiz, that took a moment. Sorry, but again, like if somebody has an exclamation, then that's an obvious target. It's just like, oh, he's played exclamation. Oh, we've got to get rid of that because everyone's kind of oh boy, he's going to have a lot of mana next turn. You know, like that's an obvious threat. So if somebody plays something that's an obvious threat, something that's obviously going to take over the game, give someone too much of an advantage, whatnot, it's clear and obvious to all the players what needs to go. Sometimes it's not that clear, but anything that can generate more value than what you put into it, for example, like the Great Henge, like I sort of was saying before, is a good target for the most part. Rhystic Study sometimes is a good target, even though I said sort of it's card draw and you shouldn't mess with people's card draw, but the annoyance of it is just really too high. And then you've got things like Smothering Tithe and things like this, especially when somebody's playing wheels and whatnot and things like this. It's like, well, that needs to go because otherwise they're just going to wheel us out of our hands, going to have 50,000 bazillion whatever treasures, and then they're going to Narset lock us, and then we're going to have no cards. So, you know, that needs to go, or something needs to happen with that, you know, because otherwise we're just dead in the water and we're not going to, you know, be able to play this game. Those are sort of more obvious sort of things, but just assessing things, slowing down a little bit, going, again, like I said, not worrying too much about it, waiting till the last minute, just going on somebody's end step, saying, okay, you know what, I can't let you have that in exclamation, Swords to Plowshares. You know, that's the way you should look at things. You shouldn't ever be like, what should I blow up? You know, sometimes it is a little bit political of a game, but a lot of the time you should know what the threats are. And again, I think, you know, if you've got an alliance with someone or something, whatever, sometimes you've got to break that alliance. Like, if somebody says, oh, don't counter what I'm going to play, or don't kill what I'm going to play, if they play that exclamation, then it might be like, well, I don't know about that. Maybe I shouldn't keep to that agreement or whatever. But, you know, sometimes it's funny to do so. But again, it's just one of those things. People want to have a fun game, and they don't want to be just like, oh, well, the game's over because you made this silly deal sometimes. Or you always make that same deal, and it's always the same thing, and it might as well be like you're playing a two-headed giant game, and then we're playing our two-headed giant game sometimes. So I just feel like sometimes like it takes away from the strategy of the game if two people seem to always team up at a very specific time or whatnot, these sorts of things. But anyway, guys, those have been the 5 things that I think people get wrong when they use removal, aka instance. And those are the 5 things that I would suggest to you to try to think about and utilize when you're playing the Game of Commander. Game of Commander is all about fun, but it's all about, not taking anything in a bad way. Like, for the most part, you've just got to sit and deal with it. Like, no, you've had some games where I certainly have that sort of just gone nowhere just because you haven't had the removal and you've just been locked out of the game, and those aren't fun. But again, there's been games where you've just sort of done your own thing, waited a few turns, got to the point where you need to be, and been able to play a cool game with other people that have been back and forth. And then there are other times where you've played, your mana rocks or your ramp spells or whatever really quickly and really early, and then you've got to a really fast and an insane start, and then no one's able to stop you for one reason or another or whatever, or they don't know what to do. And it's just like, well, I'm really sorry, guys, you didn't really do anything against me, and can you do anything against me? So, you want to just say this game, things like that tend to happen sometimes, and you've just got to be able to, say, well, you know, that was the game. But anyway, guys, hope you have enjoyed this video. And if you have enjoyed, do all the YouTube things as they say to do. Like, share, subscribe, comment, share, do all the things. We've got Patreon, and yeah, the tiers there are pretty cool. And if you also wish to, you can join up with our Discord. It's a fun little chat zone area where everyone talks about all sorts of different things, from anime to D&D to, magic, and there's even some very interesting other sections there, to say the least. But anyway, guys, hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you have, hope to see you again in another video.